He's such a boring guy, seriously. I mean, he's incredibly dull, and being around him just drags me down too. Having kids is out of the question. I get hives from stress just by being touched. Hiding in the closet, John, overheard my wife's outrageous complaints, trembling with shock and sadness. The reason I was hiding there was that I had finished work unusually early that day and decided to surprise her by hiding in the closet. I had planned to startle my wife when she got home, but I was the one who ended up being surprised. When my wife got home from work, she began talking to someone on her phone without noticing I was there. And then she started bad-mouthing me, using every filthy word she could think of. Unable to endure her tirade any longer, I quietly emerged from the closet. My name is John. I work in sales at a major food manufacturer. I met my wife, Emily, at a college mixer, and after falling for her at first sight, my persistent efforts led to our marriage. Emily is a magazine model affiliated with a modeling agency. With her charming looks and sociable, cheerful personality, she was the wife I was proud of. We had a grand wedding and chose the popular Hawaii for our honeymoon. Under the clear blue sky, we relaxed at the beach resort and then indulged in shopping at the world-famous brand stores. However, the reality of drifting apart awaited us when we returned from our honeymoon. Working for a major food company, I had a decent salary, but late nights were common, and I often traveled for work. As a result, I was hardly home on weekdays, despite being newlyweds. Emily, due to her job, left home earlier than me and returned at irregular hours. Gradually, we started having dinner separately and couldn't even share breakfast together. Then one day, returning from a business trip, I found that the double bed in our bedroom had been replaced with 2 single beds. Shocked, I confronted Emily. What is all this? We spent so much time choosing that double bed when we got married, didn't we? But her response was smooth and nonchalant. We wake up and go to bed at different times, and it's hard to rest well in one bed, right? So I traded it in for 2 singles. She explained it all smoothly, as if it was no big deal. But I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was another reason, and I couldn't accept her explanation. Because 6 months into our marriage, Emily had started refusing me, even when I asked. Even when we shared a bed, she would stiffen up to avoid any contact, curling up at the edge. Had I done something to upset her? I reviewed my actions in everyday life, but couldn't pinpoint any incident that could have caused such a rift. Gradually, dark suspicions grew in me, wondering if Emily had someone else. Once the suspicion of infidelity entered my mind, it was hard to shake off. During this time, I left for a week-long business trip. Leaving home felt unsettling, but it's just part of being a salaried employee. As she saw me off, Emily seemed unusually kind. It felt as if she was happy about my absence. With a dry smile, I set off for Nebraska, a city covered in snow, looking for a mental escape. When I finally arrived after taking the flight, I found myself in a silver world where everything was covered in snow. The view, like a world of silver, seemed to cleanse my troubled mind. I continued with a new product campaign at various supermarkets, with only 1 day left. However, the last meeting was abruptly canceled due to a family emergency for the president of the supermarket chain. The company told me to head straight home after returning to New York, considering my fatigue from the long trip. I was secretly thrilled at the unexpected half-day off and reached for my phone to tell Emily. But then, I hesitated and put the phone down. What was Emily doing when I wasn't around? A mix of curiosity and suspicion churned inside me. So, I returned home early for a change, confirmed Emily wasn't there, and hid in the closet. And that's when I heard those terrible words. When I suddenly appeared from the closet, even though I wasn't supposed to be there on a business trip, Emily was so surprised that she dropped her phone on the floor. Well, I guess so. She said so many bad things about me. I stared at my wife with cold eyes as she reacted like something out of a cartoon. When I saw my wife for the first time in a week, she was still beautiful, wearing a suit with good taste. I should have thought that she was a waste of a woman for me. Emily's true feelings, which I secretly listened to, were surprisingly vulgar and childish. I felt my love for my wife suddenly disappear. The person in question didn't even pick up the dropped cell phone. That's not true. There was a reason for what we were talking about earlier. As if clinging to me, she frantically started making incoherent excuses. Her appearance was not her usual confident self. I shook off Emily's hand and said, "Sorry, being with me must be depressing, right? I'll leave as you wish. I need to clear my head." With that, I packed the bare essentials and left our home. Emily was sobbing, but I didn't feel like comforting her, as it was her own doing. Exhausted from a business trip and with my feelings in tatters, I somehow managed to reach a cheap inn. I took a shower there and shut myself in the room. Unable to sleep, despite being tired, I lay there looking at the ceiling, reflecting on my marriage with Emily. It had already been 2 years since we got married. Just 6 months into our marriage, our bedroom life became non-existent. Whenever I tried, Emily would just refuse. I tried watching love stories together and making an effort to be more affectionate, but it had no effect. Emily kept rejecting me. Initially, I felt sad being rejected, but Emily had always been indifferent, and I was too busy with work to worry about our lack of intimacy. There were other couples around us who also had no intimacy in their marriage, so I thought it was normal and didn't think much about it. No, I was too ashamed to admit my own rejection and chose not to think about it. It might be time for us to seriously discuss our future as a couple. To decide if there's still a reason for us to stay together. The next early morning, I checked out of the inn and stepped outside. The nightmare from the day before was still on my mind, and I hardly slept. I warmed my numb hands with my breath as I turned the key to my apartment. The apartment was deserted and eerily quiet. I thought for sure that Emily was out, so I opened the door to go get some coffee from the kitchen to have in the living room. Wasn't Emily crouched down in the kitchen, swollen and exhausted from crying? She must have cried all night. "John, I'm truly sorry about yesterday. Please listen to my story." As she said this, collapsing in tears, she seemed to be deeply regretting her harsh words. If I were still head over heels for Emily as I once was, I might have forgiven her immediately. But looking at Emily's tear-streaked face again, she seemed like a complete stranger to me. In that moment, I realized I no longer trusted Emily, and felt the pain of knowing we couldn't go back to how we were. I'm going to the office right after having some coffee. While hurriedly making coffee and rummaging through the fridge, I retreated to my study without saying a word to Emily. For the following week, we continued living like strangers in the same house, and I managed my work while consulting about our future with various people. However, the only response I got was, "You're married, and it's not like your partner cheated on you, so you should forgive her." True, there was no evidence of Emily's infidelity, and she was taking good care of the home. But my decision remained unshaken. If we were to continue living together, rejected by Emily, there was no point in staying married. It wasn't just about physical intimacy, it was also about my earnest desire to have children someday. I quietly placed the divorce papers I had filled out on the living room table and went to bed without waiting for her return. That night, I suddenly awoke to a soft sensation on my leg. Emily should have been sleeping on the living room sofa. Reconsidering, I closed my eyes again, and this time, slender arms wrapped around my waist. The warm touch jolted me awake. It must have been Emily, who had slipped into the bed. When was the last time I felt the warmth of human skin? For a moment, I almost gave in to my desires as a man. At the same time, I remembered the harsh words Emily had hurled at me, like "You're such a boring man, and it's impossible for us to have children." Instantly, those feelings withered away. To Emily, whose arms were tightly wrapped around my waist, I said, "Can you let go of me? Please, don't disappoint me anymore." As I spoke, I roughly shook off her hands. After a while, Emily, still in bed, began to cry softly. "I'm truly sorry for hurting you. The truth is, ever since elementary school, I was harassed daily by a teacher, who was a man, which made me uncomfortable around men. That's why I couldn't respond to your advances." Hearing the shocking truth, I couldn't believe my ears. I want children too, and I've always wanted to be a mother, but I just couldn't bring myself to be intimate, and I've been blaming myself for it. So, to vent my frustration, I ended up making it seem like it was your fault to our friends. I wanted to apologize to you properly on our last day together as a couple. Seeing Emily sincerely apologize, I was deeply moved. Despite being married for 2 years, it was the first time I had heard about Emily's sexual trauma. Now that I think about it, every time I tried to touch her, she seemed to tense up. I was angry at myself for not understanding my wife's suffering at all. They say a marriage is like a mirror, but Emily's disrespectful behavior towards me was a reflection of my own lack of compassion towards her. I was glad that I realized my mistake before we parted ways. As soon as I felt this, tears welled up in my eyes. It might be because this is probably our last night together. In bed, I gently held Emily's hand. Even for us, there were plenty of happy moments in our marriage. How about we share one pleasant memory each, in turn, as our last memory? When I suggested this, Emily, wiping her tears, nodded in agreement. Yeah, the 2 years we spent as husband and wife were fun, weren't they? They weren't wasted at all. We began to talk, bit by bit. How Emily's dad cried a lot at our wedding. How I lost my wallet and caused a big fuss on our honeymoon. How we fought over our completely opposite tastes when choosing furniture. How happy I felt when I came home late and saw the lights on in the house. One story after another, just between the two of us. That night, we lay in bed and talked about our memories all night long. In the end, the feeling that remained wasn't regret, but gratitude for the 2 years we had together. The next day, because I stayed up until dawn, I was completely sleep-deprived and rubbed my sleepy eyes as I headed to the living room. On the table were Emily's signed divorce papers, along with a note that said, "Be happy." Next to me, there was a breakfast box containing all my favorite foods. Looking around the room, all of Emily's belongings had vanished without a trace. It was as if our marriage had been a dream. I remembered Emily's lonely smile from the day before. Wishing for each other's happiness, I muttered to myself and slowly savored the last breakfast she made for me. Several years later, I'm visiting the local park. A small hand, like a maple leaf, is firmly holding mine, and I make sure not to let go. Having remarried another woman since then, I was blessed with the child I had always wanted. Raising a child is harder than I thought, but I'm living a fulfilled and happy life. There have been various experiences to get to this point, but they make me cherish my current life even more. Wishing for Emily's happiness, wherever she is. It's all your fault. Your troubles made our daughter sick. Bring her back to me. My father-in-law, Keith, had shouted angrily through the funeral home. The next moment, I felt a dull pain on my left cheek and lost my balance, falling to the floor. Keith had struck me on the cheek. "It's because you bankrupted the company. That's why Emily had to work so hard and got sick." He towered over me, continuing his yelling. Sitting on the floor, holding my painful cheek, I pondered. Maybe he was right. I became president of a small food processing company left by my father at age 30. But 10 years later, the company's performance rapidly worsened and eventually went bankrupt. At that time, the company had a huge debt. I immediately started a new job, but my earnings weren't enough to pay off the debts, so my wife, Emily, 8 years younger, also worked full-time to support our family while caring for our 3 children. We shared household and child care duties, but with young children, there was always much to do, from school drop-offs and pickups, to attending to them when sick, to preparing meals, cleaning, and doing laundry. Even at home, there was never a moment of rest. Raising 3 kids while working was extremely tough. And since I often had more overtime work, the burden of childcare and housework fell more on Emily. This life continued for about 8 years, until Emily collapsed from overwork 3 months ago. At the hospital, blood tests revealed abnormalities, and we were told, unfortunately, it's quite advanced, and there's nothing more we can do. When Dr. Johnson told me this, it felt like a cold shower had hit my heart. Blood drained from my face, and my legs went weak. I wished it was a dream, hoping desperately to wake up from it. Dr. Johnson, how much longer can Emily live? Perhaps 3 more months. 3 months, that's too short. I thought so. It wasn't enough time. I wanted more time with Emily. She was only 40 years old. We still had so many things to do together, so many places to go with the family. I couldn't hold back my tears. Our children were at a sensitive age, the eldest 14 and the youngest 10. I wondered how much they would grieve without their mother. I struggled with whether to inform them and Emily about her life expectancy. But, wanting her to live her remaining life without regrets and to prepare the children gradually for the shock, I decided to disclose it. Me, only 3 months to live. You're kidding, right? Tell me it's a lie. Initially, Emily laughed it off in disbelief, but when she realized it was true, her expression turned complex. Who jokes about such things? Don't worry, I'm sure I'll get better soon. She struggled to accept the reality, remaining brave without tears. Yes, I believe that too, but as things stand, I think we should tell the children about the prognosis. When I shared my thoughts, she contemplated for a while before agreeing. Yes, they need to be prepared. That was the first time Emily showed her tears. She must have felt helpless, imagining the children's grief. Michael, please, take good care of our children. My wife clung to my chest, sobbing. How sad it must have been for her, knowing she wouldn't see our beloved children grow up. From then on, I juggled work and visits to Emily's hospital to provide for our 3 children. I wished I could quit my job to spend every minute with her, but, drowning in debt, it was an impossible dream. Emily must have felt so lonely. I had caused her so much trouble, failed to notice her illness until it was too late, and couldn't even be by her side in her final moments. What a failure of a husband I am. It's no wonder Keith hit me. He raised Emily alone and never wanted her to suffer. As I hung my head in these thoughts, an incident occurred. I don't want to see your face. Do you realize how much my daughter suffered because of you? This isn't a joke. Keith, consumed by anger, grabbed a cup and threw cold water at me. Father, please stop, a firm voice echoed through the funeral home. It was Emily's younger sister, Sarah, 2 years younger than her. She rushed in, standing between us. How can you do this? Emily's passing isn't Michael's fault. Don't take out your grief on him. Sarah. Keith looked at her, his expression complex. But Sarah, he bankrupted his company, drowned in debt, and made Emily suffer. Her life was miserable because of him. He argued back. But Sarah responded strongly. That's not true. Don't assume Emily was unhappy. She was happy with Michael. She shouted, pulling out her phone from her purse. Read this. It shows how happy she was. She operated her phone and handed it to him. What's this? It's Emily's social media. She posted her thoughts there every day. Keith stared at the screen, his hands trembling. Tears fell from his eyes. "Emily," he whispered and wiped his eyes. What was written there? Curious, I timidly asked. "May I see it too?" Then Keith stood next to me, showing me the phone screen. It read as follows. "Tonight, it took an hour and a half to put the kids to bed, but lying with them is pure bliss, especially in winter. Cuddling up to their warm bodies, I feel a deep warmth inside. Their sleeping faces are angelic, so adorable, and just looking at them is healing. Juggling work and parenting 3 kids is tough, but my children are adorable, and I find joy in my job every day. Staying connected to society, even as a mother, is something I'm grateful for. I often hear my stay-at-home mom friends talk about feeling lonely or wanting an escape from parenting. I'm fortunate to find a balance between work and parenting. I'm so grateful for my husband leading the way in housework and parenting. Without him, I wouldn't have this happiness. The debt repayment is tough, but we're managing it together, and we should be able to afford our children's future education. Our eldest son stopped attending school. He couldn't make friends and was scared of talking to people. Michael took a day off to chalk to the school. There's a support room for students who struggle in the classroom. For now, he'll attend there. He finds it easier to talk to Michael, maybe because they're both male. Michael listened so kindly and carefully. Our son felt reassured. I'm thankful for Michael. He's truly reliable. Every day is busy but fulfilling and fun. Just seeing my family's faces makes my heart feel lively. I love my family. No matter how late Michael comes home from work, he always listens to me intently. Just talking to him relieves my mood. Seeing his smile heals my work stress. It's like magic. Today, I was told I have 3 months to live. At first, it felt unreal, like it wasn't about me. But thinking about leaving my family brought uncontrollable tears. I don't want to be apart from them. I want to be with Michael and the kids much longer, but that is not possible. Happy memories flooded my mind like a movie. Loved by Michael and the kids, I believe my life was truly happy. To Michael, thank you for meeting me and marrying me. Because of you, I had a happy life. I'm grateful. I wish we could have been together longer, but please forgive me for leaving you and the kids first. I'll always wish for your happiness. If you find a wonderful woman, don't hesitate to remarry, but please don't forget about me. Remember our first date by the sea, the words you said during the proposal, how you were the first to cry at our wedding, our honeymoon in France, the times we took the kids to the zoo, our picnics in the park, and making cakes together on birthdays. All these memories are precious to me. I won't forget them, so please, don't you forget either. Reading this, I couldn't hold back and covered my face with my hands, crying. After that were messages to each of our children and Emily's parents and sister. Emily asked me to let family read this after she passed. Sarah said, I was going to show it after the funeral, when everyone had calmed down, but you see, Father, Emily wasn't unhappy. She was happy with Michael, right? Yes, that's true. Keith nodded, wiping away tears. Sorry, Michael, for hitting you. I truly regret it. Can you forgive me? He apologized to me. It's okay, Father. I understand your grief. Losing someone dear can be unbearable. I thought I was to blame for Emily's death. But Emily wouldn't have wanted that. She wanted me to be happy. I had to live looking forward, not back. Can you forgive me, after what I did? I'm so sorry. You're a kind person, Michael. That's why Emily was happy with you. Keith said, wiping his tear-soaked face. Though my cheek hurt from being hit, humans make mistakes. He was remorseful, so I had to forgive him. As Emily would have wanted. I knew he was a kind and gentle person, so I decided to forget the incident. I shook his hand firmly. Seeing this, Sarah also cried. Our 3 children, seated in the family section, hugged each other and wept. It would take time to heal from this grief. But for Emily's last wish, We had to be happy. I just wanted to be glad that Emily's life was happy. In the end, she passed away peacefully, holding my and our children's hands. She lay in the coffin, peaceful as she had been in her final moments. Though we were parting from her physical presence, she would surely watch over us from above. So I, too, will always remember her. I will protect the children with my life, as she would have wanted. Thank you for loving and supporting me. I silently told Emily's portrait. She seemed to smile back, responding to my words. A week after the funeral, our eldest son, who had been skipping school, started going again. I don't want to make Mom in heaven sad, so I'll try my best. I feel like I can do it if I think she's cheering for me. That's great, Tom. Do your best. Mom would be proud. Talk to me about anything, okay? Our children were slowly growing stronger, overcoming their mother's death. Emily would continue to watch over us from within our hearts. I'll work hard not to worry you. I promised myself, vowing to live positively for the kids and for Emily. My husband is a manager at a prestigious company. You, with just a high school diploma, could never achieve that in your lifetime. While attending a reception at a high-end restaurant, I ran into a former classmate who made snide remarks about how out of place I seemed, and suddenly began bragging about her husband. Unaware of my circumstances, she continued to belittle me, calling me a failure and a bottom feeder. So, he's getting fired tomorrow. What? Having reached my limit with her comments, I finally responded to her. My classmate was just confused and had nothing to say. Ignoring her, I left the scene. As a result, she went from heaven to hell, facing a miserable fate. My name is Michael, and I'm 46 years old. I run a fashion company. At 35, I took over the company from the previous president, Mr. Thompson, and became the president myself. Thanks to a referral, I got a job at this company right after graduating from high school, and my hard work was recognized by Mr. Thompson. To this day, I work closely with my employees to contribute to the company's success. In my personal life, at 25, Mr. Thompson suggested a formal date for me, and I married Sarah, a woman 3 years my junior who also worked at the same company. Soon after our marriage, we were blessed with a daughter, who is now a college student. When Sarah became pregnant, she left her job to focus on homemaking and child rearing, but when I became president, she returned to work as my secretary. With Sarah's support, I continue to strive in my role as president. Despite the busy yet fulfilling days, a certain incident led me to face a significant challenge. I grew up in a single-parent household, raised by my mother. I managed to attend high school, but college was out of reach, leading me to choose employment instead. In my sophomore year of high school, my mother had to be hospitalized, prompting me to take on a paper route in the early mornings and juggle evening shifts at a diner and a tavern to cover our living expenses. Despite all my efforts, I was barely scraping by, unable to muster the funds for the school trip, ultimately forcing me to give it up. Hearing this, my classmate, Emily, immediately started mocking me. Can't even afford the school trip, typical for someone from a single-parent family. Can't scrape together a few bucks. Your mom's really hit rock bottom. Emily's words led her friends to join in the mockery. I was furious about the insults towards my mother but knew arguing would be futile. I endured it all in silence. Emily, being a beauty and apparently the daughter of some company president, was the center of attention in our class. As a result, with most of the class following Emily's lead, I was ridiculed by everyone. However, even so, I had one person I could call a true friend. That was Brian. Brian would approach me when I was alone in class, and perhaps knowing about my family situation, he'd ask, "How's your mom doing?" showing concern even for my mother. We became close friends in our second year of high school, and still hang out as adults. I even got my current job through Brian's introduction. Any friend of Brian's is more than welcome here. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I owe my current situation to Brian. Truly, I can't thank Brian enough. One day, as I was thinking about inviting Brian out for a drink, holding her phone, Sarah came into my office from the neighboring secretary's room. "Sorry, can I leave early today?" Worried she might be feeling unwell, I asked what was wrong, and she said, "It's not me, it's Jessica. She's having a tough time again. Too scared to move." Sarah looked anxious. I told her to go right away and saw her off. After Sarah left, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. For about a week now, I've been dealing with a concern. It's about a stalker bothering my daughter, Jessica. Going back about a month ago, while we were having dinner, she came home from her part-time job, her hair disheveled and her face streaked with tears. Concerned, I asked Jessica what happened, and she whispered, "A customer almost forced me into his car." Jessica said so in a soft voice. According to her detailed account, a customer at the diner where she worked part-time had expressed his feelings for her a while ago, wanting to date her. Moreover, the man was in his 50s, older than me. Jessica naturally refused, but he persistently pursued her, eventually ambushing her after work and attempting to drag her into his car, from which she managed to escape. Hearing Jessica's story, my wife and I were horrified. We immediately made her quit her job and decided to pick her up from college if it got late, but that didn't put an end to the situation. The stalking continued, and he began appearing at her college and places she went out with friends. Realizing we couldn't ignore this any longer, Jessica and I decided to consult the police, but they said they couldn't do anything unless there was actual harm. Thinking I had no choice but to catch the stalker myself, I found he was cautious and never showed up when I was watching. In other words, it was a situation where nothing could be done. It was a situation I couldn't do anything about, except pick up Jessica when she called. As a parent, I felt utterly helpless. One day, as I was pondering what to do, the stalker made contact with Jessica once again. She hurriedly fled, but the fear was so overwhelming that she locked herself in her room. "I'm too scared." Hearing her distressed voice, both Sarah and I felt angry at our powerlessness. Knowing something had to be done for Jessica's sake, I decided to ask Brian for a favor. I called Brian to a cafe near the office right after work. "What's the rush? You know, I'm pretty busy too. Not as much as you, but still." "I know, but you're the only one I can ask for this." I explained to Brian about Jessica's stalking situation and how the police were of no help. "You're my last hope, Brian. Can you please find out who the stalker is?" Brian had started his own detective agency after graduating from college. Hoping a professional could uncover the stalker's identity, I requested his help. Brian, who had been joking around, changed his demeanor after hearing about Jessica. "If it's for Jessica, I've got to do it. Leave it to me, I'll find out everything as quickly as possible." Brian's reassuring words brought me some relief. As I was giving Brian details about Jessica's college and the nearest train station, I heard a familiar voice say, "Isn't that Brian and the poor guy?" Turning around, I saw Emily, a classmate from school. Despite the years, her beauty was unmistakable, and I recognized her immediately. "Emily." Pretending not to notice, I greeted her. As I responded casually, Emily looked at Brian and me, then said, "Still hanging out as a dull duo, I see. You guys would fit better in a cafeteria than this stylish cafe. It's mismatched. Why don't you move to another place?" With a disdainful smile, she started mocking us. Even after decades, her fundamental nature hadn't changed, I thought. "We're in the middle of an important conversation. If you don't have any business here, could you please leave?" Brian glared sharply at Emily, who turned red with anger and left, returning to a young man who seemed to be with her. After discussing thoroughly with Brian, I left the cafe, entrusting Jessica's matter to him. A week later, Brian told me he had something to discuss, so we met at the cafe again. Take a look at this. The moment I looked at the documents Brian handed me, I was shocked beyond belief. Can't believe such a coincidence. Not just you, I was surprised too. Brian seemed just as astonished. But with this much evidence, we can make a move right away. Just as I was about to say something, Brian interjected, "Give me just 3 more days. No, 2 days will do." Brian asked me to wait for him to take action. Considering Jessica's situation, I honestly wanted to resolve it quickly. Even now, it's distressing for Jessica to leave the house, and I've had to encourage her to go to college to ensure the perpetrator is caught. However, there might be a reason Brian is insisting on waiting. With that in mind, I reluctantly agreed. The day after learning the shocking truth, I went to a high-end restaurant for a business dinner. As I was heading to the restroom, I heard a voice saying, "Why is a pool person like you here?" Even more out of place than at the cafe, there stood Emily Parker. While annoyed at running into such an unpleasant person, I explained I was there for work, only to be met with disbelief. For work? Impossible. A high school graduate from the bottom rung couldn't possibly have a decent job. You must be working at some small-scale operation, right? Without knowing anything about my job, she mocked me based on her assumptions. Actually, I happened to be a president of a company. I was so infuriated that I retorted to Emily, "A high school grad being a president? That's impossible. Even if that were true, it would only be a small business. That's not a real company." Still, Emily continued to ridicule me. Fed up with her annoying behavior, she suddenly started bragging about her husband. "My husband is a manager at a well-known company. Someone like you, a high school graduate, could never achieve that in your lifetime." Emily proudly spoke about her husband being a sales manager at the well-known apparel brand Y, a company everyone is familiar with. Then, she kept comparing her husband to me, calling me a lowlife and a failure, repeatedly belittling me. That was the last straw for me. "So, he'll be fired tomorrow." What? After saying just that, I left a bewildered Emily and walked away. After the dinner, I returned home. I arrived home before 9 p.m., and the kids had already retreated to their rooms, leaving only Sarah in the living room. "Welcome back. You must be tired after such a long day. How did the dinner go?" Sarah greeted me warmly, and I asked about Jessica. Sarah's face clouded over instantly. "It seems hopeless. She cried today, saying she wants to quit college." "That's tough, but it'll all be over tomorrow." My words puzzled Sarah. To Sarah, I said, "Actually," and proceeded to discuss a certain plan of mine. She hadn't been informed that I consulted Brian about Jessica's situation. I wondered why you, who are usually so supportive, encouraged Jessica to go to college. So that was the reason. I wish you had told me. I would have helped. Sarah seemed to understand after hearing about my plan. I had kept the details from even my wife, Sarah, wanting to keep the matter confidential. "There's something I need to ask you, Sarah." When I made a request, Sarah immediately agreed, saying, "Leave it to me. I have a wide network. I'll arrange everything by end of today." With that, she disappeared into the bedroom with her phone. I then prepared for the next day by taking a bath and resting. The following day, I was busy with urgent work in the secretary's room. There was a reason for working there. As I was making progress, the president's office became a bit noisy. "President Johnson should be back soon, so if you could wait a bit longer." I heard Sarah's voice, followed by a man's, "No worries. I was surprised when you called me yesterday. To think President Johnson has something to discuss with us." The previous day, I had asked Sarah to invite Tyler, the sales manager, and his wife. Thinking Sarah, my secretary, had a wide network, I requested her assistance, and she managed to contact them quickly. arranging for their visit today. When Sarah stepped out to prepare coffee, Tyler and his wife left alone in the president's office. Listening in, I could hear Tyler and his wife happily discussing the prospect of a promotion. Being called in as a couple, could it be a position like executive director? If you become an executive director, we can expect a nice retirement package. Tyler seemed to be enjoying the moment, unaware of what was about to unfold. I almost laughed at their carefree attitude but composed myself and opened the door to the president's office. "President Johnson, thank you for calling us." "Hello." Emily, who stood up following Tyler, froze the moment she saw my face. She never imagined that the classmate she had so disdainfully mocked for being just a high school graduate was now the president of her husband's company. Seeing her mouth open and close in shock, I greeted her. "Nice to see you again since yesterday." Unaware of our history, Tyler asked Emily if she knew me. "Well, we're acquaintances, sort of." Emily stumbled over her words trying to answer Tyler's question. "We went to the same high school." I answered for her, and Tyler's face brightened. "But my memories with her are all unpleasant." My sarcastic remark froze the room until Sarah returned with coffee, turning it into a tense silence. The other day, after being mocked by her wife, I declared that I would fire her husband, which is why I invited you here today. Tyler reacted quickly, chastising Emily. "You said that, and to insult President Johnson like that, what were you thinking?" "But I never thought a high school grad could be a president." Even as Emily made excuses, she showed no sign of apologizing, even when Tyler told her, "You need to apologize too." My wife was extremely rude, and I apologize for that, but to be fired over this seems a bit much. Could you possibly overlook this just this once? Desperate not to lose his job, Tyler repeatedly apologized. However, Emily remained indifferent, regardless of Tyler's apologies. "It seems your wife has no remorse whatsoever," I pointed out to Tyler, to which Emily retorted angrily, "Why should a high school graduate like you be a president? It's your fault for not saying it, and firing someone over this is wrongful termination." Emily lashed out at me. Tyler hurriedly covered Emily's mouth, but it was already too late. I decided to explain to Emily how I became the president. I joined a company Tyler works for as a sales manager right after high school. My best friend, Brian, is the nephew of the company's former president, Mr. Thompson, with their fathers being brothers. Initially, I was hired because of my connection to Brian. Later, at 30, I took over the company from Mr. Thompson, leading to my current position. Despite my concerns about leading a large number of employees, the sense of fulfillment outweighed my fears, and after 5 years of training, I became the president. That's how I became the president. I never knew that, but to be fired over this. Emily turned pale but still offered no apology. It's not just for this that he's being fired. I'll explain the real reason now. With that, I signaled to Sarah, asking her to bring someone from the secretary's room. As Sarah called out, Brian burst into the president's office. Brian's entrance shocked Emily, while Tyler looked confused. "Tyler, you should be well aware, shouldn't you?" Even when I asked, Tyler just tilted his head. Brian placed several documents and a photo on the table. Seeing the photo, Tyler's face went white. However, Emily, sitting beside him, was the only one unable to follow the conversation. "Actually, this girl is my daughter. She's been a victim of stalking for a while, and I had my friend, a detective, investigate it." "You're the stalker, aren't you?" I glared at Tyler, who started trembling and nodded faintly. "Honey, that's a lie, right? She tricked you or something." Incredulous, Emily suggested as if Jessica was to blame. Furious and on the verge of lashing out, I let Brian explain the investigation's findings. When Brian handed me the investigation results and I saw the stalker's face, I immediately knew he was one of our employees. It was Tyler, whom I had seen several times before. I was shocked because Tyler had always seemed like a serious employee, not the type to engage in stalking. When Brian finished explaining the situation to Emily, I addressed Tyler. "Do you understand why you're being dismissed? It's not just because of what you did to my daughter, but because we can't employ someone capable of such irrational behavior. You understand, right, Tyler?" Tyler, seemingly at a loss for words, quietly nodded. "Obviously, what you did to my daughter constitutes a serious crime. We will be taking appropriate action, so please cooperate." Tyler, fearing police involvement, begged, "Please, anything but that." But recalling the fear in my daughter's eyes, I couldn't hold back. "Do you even understand how terrified my daughter was? If you had any understanding of her feelings, you'd accept your punishment." My outburst left Tyler hanging his head in shame. I thought it was all over. "I'm divorcing you, stalker. Leave this place immediately." Then, turning to me with a sly smile, she approached with a shocking proposition. "I'm sorry for everything, but as compensation, I'll become your wife. Aren't you lucky to have someone as beautiful as me?" In front of her husband, she was shamelessly making advances towards me. Disgusted by her behavior, I informed her that I was already married with children. Undeterred, she bizarrely suggested being a second wife. As I pondered what to do, Brian burst out laughing. "What's so funny? Got a problem?" Emily bristled at Brian bursting into laughter. In front of his wife, proposing to be a second wife is out of the question. If he cheats and gets divorced, you'll drag him down from his position as president. Caught off guard, Emily muttered, "What? In fact, my wife Sarah is the daughter of the former president, Mr. Thompson." At 25, President Thompson unexpectedly suggested, "If you're not seeing anyone, why don't you meet my daughter?" He wanted me to consider a formal date with his daughter. I was too intimidated to refuse, and though I initially resisted, President Thompson's persistence led me to accept. However, upon meeting, we instantly connected, and things quickly progressed from dating to marriage. Thus, Sarah is not only the daughter of the former president, but also Brian's cousin. Upon hearing this, Emily turned pale, muttering, "This can't be happening. What do I do? Thought you could cozy up to me to pay off your nightclub debts. Too bad." When I sarcastically commented to Emily, she wore a look of surprise. When investigating my daughter's stalker, learning Emily was his wife, Brian suggested, "Something's off with her too. Give me time to investigate her." The investigation revealed Emily's substantial debts from frequenting nightclubs. She had been using Tyler's money to pay off her debts, but with divorce looming, she turned her sights on me. "What's this about nightclub debts?" Tyler confronted her. "Now's not the time for that. They started arguing in front of us. Please discuss this at home. We'll involve professionals regarding my daughter's case and contact you later." I interjected, eager for them to leave. They mumbled incomprehensibly, refusing to go. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." When I firmly stated that, the two scattered like spiders. Afterwards, we decided to settle Jessica's stalking case for lawyers, concluding it with a settlement payment. However, I made it clear that if there was any further harassment towards Jessica, we would not hesitate to involve the police without question. Tyler later told me during the settlement that he and Emily had divorced. Unable to find stable employment after being fired, Tyler now juggles multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and the settlement. As for Emily, she seemed to think she could rely on her parents even after the divorce. However, once her parents learned of this incident, they disowned her. Despite this, she continued her nightclub visits, further increasing her debts. As a result, she is now working in a job that capitalizes on her beauty. Given her age, it's likely going to be challenging for her to lead a stable life moving forward. However, this is the bed she made, and I hope she manages. Since then, I've continued to dedicate myself to my work as usual. Jessica, who had been afraid to go out, has finally regained her spirits and started attending college with enthusiasm. Then, she started working part-time at her new store, and perhaps finding it suited her, she suddenly exclaimed one day, "After I graduate, I want to work at Dad's company. This is the first job I've ever found so fulfilling." That's what she announced. The prospect of working with my daughter is a delightful one, but there are still 2 years left until she graduates. If Jessica's feelings remain the same, I thought it might be nice to work together,